He served his country with honor, but he never saw the betrayal coming from inside his own home. We trust the people we share our lives with. But what happens when love turns cold and loyalty becomes lethal? When a decorated Green Beret is found dead, his body dismembered and stuffed into duffel bags, the brutal truth isn't buried deep. It's lying in plain sight, inside the very home he shared with his wife. She claimed it was self-defense. But the timeline was off. The story kept shifting. And one twisted discovery left even the most seasoned detectives stunned. So here's the question. Why would a woman who stood by his side for years snap just days after he filed for divorce? Was it fear? Rage? Or a secret she couldn't let him take with him? Jeffrey Bordeaux wasn't just another soldier. He was a Green Beret, a special forces operator trained to endure the unimaginable. He thrived under pressure, adapted without hesitation, and led with quiet confidence. His military record was stacked with deployments, commendations, and the kind of experience that leaves a man forever changed. But off the battlefield, Jeffrey was known for something else entirely: his heart. Jeff didn't wear his rank at home. Around his family and friends, he was laid back, friendly, a soft-spoken father who loved grilling on weekends and watching football with his kids. He wasn't flashy, wasn't loud. He was reliable. Predictable in the best way. You could set your watch by him. Born and raised in a working-class neighborhood in Louisiana, Jeff learned early on the value of discipline. His father worked construction, his mother cleaned houses. They didn't have much, but they had order. His mother used to say, "If you take care of people, they'll take care of you." Jeff lived by that rule. He joined the Army out of high school not for glory but because he wanted to build a better future. The military gave him structure, and he gave it everything. Within years he was selected for Special Forces. That path isn't handed to anyone. It's earned through grit, intelligence, and endurance most people can't comprehend. But Jeff made it. And he stayed in for over a decade. He met Kelly at a cookout hosted by a fellow soldier. She was magnetic, sharp, outspoken, flirtatious. The kind of woman who knew how to take command of a room. Jeff was drawn to her confidence. He liked that she challenged him, teased him, pushed back. Their courtship moved fast. Friends say Jeff was head over heels. Within a year they were married. For a while things were good. Really good. They had a daughter. Bought a house just outside of Fort Bragg. He stayed on active duty. She handled the household. They posted family pictures online. Smiles, vacations, birthdays. Everything looked solid. Before we go deeper, what do you think really happened here? Drop your thoughts in the comments. But something shifted after Jeff's last deployment. He came back quieter, more contemplative. He never talked about what he saw overseas, but those closest to him could tell it took a toll. Kelly didn't seem as patient anymore. Small arguments became regular. Finances got tight. Jeff started picking up extra duties on base, even weekend gigs to cover costs. It was around that time friends noticed him looking off. Not physically but emotionally drained. One buddy mentioned Jeff seemed like he was always second-guessing himself. Like he was trying to fix something no one else could see. He didn't talk about it much. That wasn't his style. But he once told a friend, "I think she's seeing someone." Nobody could prove it. There was no dramatic confrontation. No shouting matches or police calls. Just whispers. Kelly started spending more nights out with friends. Her explanations got vaguer. She seemed to be living her own life, parallel to the one they built together. Then came the money problems. Jeff noticed withdrawals from their joint account that didn't add up. Hundreds of dollars at a time. Sometimes at odd hours. When he asked, she brushed it off. Groceries, she'd say. Or, just stuff for the house. But nothing new ever showed up. One night, he got a call from his bank alerting him to an attempted cash transfer overseas. When he confronted Kelly, she claimed it must be a glitch. He didn't push. At least not openly. But after that, he changed his passwords. By the time he spoke to a lawyer about filing for divorce, Jeff was already living in the guest room. His clothes were folded in military precision on a twin bed. His daughter noticed. She once asked him, "Why doesn't mommy let you sleep in your room anymore?" He didn't answer. Even then he kept his routine. Wake up at 5 a.m. run. Shower. Uniform. Base. Home by 6. Cook dinner if Kelly wasn't around. Help with homework. Read bedtime stories. Rinse. Repeat. The morning he disappeared was unremarkable on the surface. Jeff had breakfast. Dropped his daughter off at school. Texted his brother a quick, "We still on for Saturday?" and headed home. No one heard from him after that. His phone stopped pinging. His car never left the driveway. Messages went unanswered. By the time police were called, 3 days had passed. Kelly told neighbors he was probably just cooling off. But his brothers knew better. Jeff Bordeaux wasn't the kind of man who vanished. Not without a plan. Not without letting someone know. And definitely not without saying goodbye to his daughter. When investigators eventually showed up at the house, they found it too neat. No signs of struggle. But something wasn't right. It would take one wrong smell in the garage to crack it open. But in those early hours, before any bags were opened or names were named, one truth was already clear. Jeffrey Bordeaux had trusted the wrong person. The first sign something was wrong came when Jeffrey Bordeaux missed a scheduled meeting with a fellow soldier. Not just late, he didn't show up at all. Calls went unanswered. Texts unread. For a man who ran on military precision, it set off alarms immediately. When 24 hours passed with no word, a concerned friend called the local police to request a wellness check. It was a quiet suburban neighborhood. The kind where lawns were trimmed with ruler-like precision and people waved politely without ever truly knowing their neighbors. From the outside, the Bordeaux residence looked normal. But when officers stepped inside, that illusion dissolved quickly. The front door was unlocked. Not kicked in. Not tampered with. Just unlocked. It creaked open into a house that felt frozen in time. Everything in its place, no signs of struggle. But there was something off. A chill that didn't come from the air conditioner. It wasn't just silent. It was hollow. Lifeless. The kind of silence that creeps under your skin and sets your instincts on edge. The living room was spotless. Too spotless. There was no clutter, no warmth, just cold surfaces and the faint, unmistakable scent of bleach. Officers exchanged glances. The kitchen looked like it hadn't been used in days. A single mug sat drying on the counter as if waiting for someone who never returned. They fanned out, calling Jeffrey's name. No response. One officer opened the bedroom door. Bed made, drawers closed, nothing disturbed. Another checked the bathroom. Again nothing. Then someone stepped into the garage. It hit them instantly, the smell. Not just bleach. Something darker. Metallic. Decaying. The kind of smell that settles in your throat and makes you want to gag. At the far end of the garage were 3 large military-style duffel bags, lined up as if they were waiting to be deployed. Only these weren't packed for any mission. They were heavy. Heavier than they should have been. The fabric was damp. When officers unzipped the first one, even their training couldn't prepare them for what they saw. Inside were human limbs. Wrapped in layers of black plastic. Taped tightly. Like someone had taken great care to disguise what they'd done, but not enough to completely hide it. A hand protruded slightly from the wrap, fingers curled. The skin pale, stiff. It was unmistakable, dismembered body parts. Within minutes, the entire house was swarming with investigators. Forensics teams, homicide detectives, and evidence techs poured in, each one growing more disturbed as the scale of what had happened came into focus. The other bags revealed more of the same. Arms, legs, tissue packed with towels. One bag contained a torso barely recognizable. The head was missing. It would take DNA confirmation to be sure, but no one doubted who it was. Jeffrey Bordeaux, the disciplined, loyal 42-year-old Green Beret, was now a victim of a murder so gruesome it rattled even the most seasoned officers. Yet there was no sign of forced entry. No struggle. No bloodstains in the house. Just the faint scent of bleach and a trail of quiet cruelty. Investigators swept every inch of the home. They found cleaning supplies under the sink. Multiple bottles of bleach, rubber gloves, rolls of duct tape. The trash bins were empty, suspiciously clean. The floors had clearly been scrubbed, but luminol testing revealed traces of blood in the master bedroom and garage. A security system had been recently disabled. But that didn't mean they were flying blind. One neighbor's doorbell camera offered a clue. It showed Jeffrey arriving home 4 days earlier, around 5:17 p.m., carrying groceries. He walked up the driveway, smiled briefly at the camera, then stepped inside. That was the last time anyone saw him alive. After that, nothing. No footage of him leaving. No sign of Kelly Bordeaux, his wife. She wasn't at the house. Her phone was off. Her social media had gone dark. And her car? Gone. It didn't take long for Kelly to become the prime suspect. Detectives started putting together a timeline. They learned Jeffrey had filed for divorce just days before he disappeared. Friends said the marriage had been tense. Quietly toxic. Kelly hadn't taken the news well. In fact, she'd reportedly snapped during a conversation with a mutual friend saying, "If he thinks he can walk out on me, he's got another thing coming." But this was beyond a lover's rage. This was methodical. Cold. Planned. Search teams began combing nearby fields, dumpsters, and rivers for the missing head. They expanded the search to storage units, checking for any rental agreements under Kelly's name. Meanwhile, the community was reeling. A man who had survived war zones, trained for combat, and dedicated his life to protecting others, murdered in his own home. Not by an enemy, but possibly by the person he trusted most. Still, the question remained, where was Kelly? And what could have pushed her to do something this brutal? By now, a full-scale manhunt was underway. But the most haunting part wasn't what they found. It was what they didn't. Because even after uncovering so many answers, one thing still echoed louder than the rest. Why wasn't anyone watching sooner? Kelly Bordeaux didn't grow up surrounded by calm. Her childhood was a blend of instability and tension. Raised in a home where arguments cracked like thunder behind closed doors, she became fluent in emotional volatility. Teachers remembered her as bright but unpredictable. Classmates called her intense. Quick to laugh, quicker to snap. By her 20s, Kelly had already left behind a trail of short-lived romances, each one beginning with whirlwind promises and ending in dramatic, sometimes violent fallout. One ex-boyfriend told investigators later, "You never really knew what mood you'd get. Sweet one minute, ice cold the next." Then came Jeffrey Bordeaux. Jeff, the disciplined Green Beret with a solid career and a steady moral compass, couldn't have been more different. Friends speculated that his calm presence grounded her. At first, it seemed like a perfect match. Kelly loved the structure. Jeff loved her fire. They married quickly. But over time, that fire began to scorch everything it touched. Their marriage transformed from passionate to performative. Arguments became a staple. Not loud always, just simmering. Silent stares. Closed doors. Passive-aggressive jabs over dinner. Jeff, ever the loyal soldier, kept trying. He wanted the family. The home. The picture-perfect life. Kelly wanted control. Friends noticed her becoming more possessive. She would show up unannounced at Jeff's work events. Scroll endlessly through his phone when he wasn't looking. Once, she allegedly accused him of cheating simply because he smiled too warmly at a waitress. Jeff brushed it off. "That's just Kelly," he'd say. "She means well." But there were signs her behavior was escalating. Jeff became quieter. More distracted. He started sleeping in the guest room. His energy changed, co-workers said. He was present but distant. Then the financial red flags started popping up. Unexplained bank withdrawals. Credit card charges Jeff didn't recognize. When he asked her about them, she became defensive, flipping the confrontation into accusations of distrust. Friends remembered Jeff looking tired, saying he felt like he was walking on eggshells at home. Eventually, Jeff filed for divorce. It was a quiet, measured decision. No theatrics. No shouting. Just paperwork. But to Kelly, it wasn't just a breakup. It was betrayal. Sources close to the case say Kelly was blindsided. She refused to move out. Refused to talk about dividing assets. There were heated text exchanges between them in the weeks leading up to his disappearance. Kelly allegedly said, "You're not taking my house. Or my daughter." What investigators found next painted a chilling picture. During a search of the home, they discovered a second phone hidden inside a shoebox in Kelly's closet. This wasn't Jeff's. It was Kelly's private device. One he didn't know about. On it, dozens of late-night texts to an unidentified number. Some mundane, others more cryptic. "He's ruining everything. I can't let him do this to me. No one will believe him." The number belonged to a man she'd been seeing on and off, a name she never mentioned to Jeff. Under questioning, Kelly claimed Jeff had come home drunk and attacked her. That she fought back in self-defense. But the medical examiner's report didn't support that narrative. Jeff's injuries were precise. Controlled. Clean. There were no defensive wounds on her, no bruises, no cuts. And the level of dismemberment pointed to planning, not panic. There was also the bleach. So much bleach. Bleach poured in the garage. Bleach-soaked towels. Bleach under her fingernails. Detectives confronted her with the timeline, the footage, the inconsistencies. Her expression reportedly didn't change. Just one sentence in a flat, emotionless tone. "He wasn't going to leave me. Not really." A single line that chilled every officer in the room. To this day, some believe Kelly had convinced herself that if she couldn't have Jeff, no one could. She didn't just snap. She planned. She watched. She waited. And when he handed her those divorce papers, her answer wasn't a signature. It was silence. And a garage full of duffel bags. If you're still with me, you know this case isn't just brutal. It's personal. Like and subscribe if you're into stories that dig deeper than headlines. The discovery sent shockwaves through the case. Kelly wasn't alone. For weeks, investigators had operated under the assumption that Jeff's tragic death had been the result of a crime of passion carried out by a jealous lover. But the truth was far darker, and the clues pointed to something far more intricate than anyone had anticipated. A neighbor had reported seeing a man lurking near the house in the days leading up to the murder. At first, it seemed like an odd detail, just another anxious eyewitness misremembering a routine sighting. But this tip would soon unravel the case in ways no one could have expected. The man had been seen leaving Kelly's home late one night, his presence far too specific to ignore. DNA recovered from the bags, believed to be part of the evidence against Jeff, told another story. Forensic teams had been diligent in testing the substances that had been retrieved, and as they cross-checked each strand of hair, they found an anomaly. The hair wasn't Jeff's. It was someone else's. Someone completely unidentified. Who else had been involved in this twisted plot? And why was Kelly so quick to shift all blame onto Jeff? The next break came from phone records. Hours before Kelly called the police to report the crime, her phone had pinged a location, one that was far from the scene of the murder. The coordinates placed her at a storage unit on the outskirts of town. What was she doing there and what did she leave behind? When investigators dug into her past, they uncovered something that stunned everyone. Kelly had visited this very storage unit multiple times in the weeks leading up to Jeff's death. Something was being kept there. But what? Just when it seemed like things couldn't get more complicated, a former coworker came forward with a chilling revelation. Kelly had confided in them months before the murder, revealing a sinister thought that left them rattled to the core. If I can't have Jeff, no one can. The coworker hadn't taken the statement seriously at the time, chalking it up to a fleeting emotional outburst. But now, with everything coming to light, it felt like a direct admission of guilt. Was Kelly planning this all along, or had someone convinced her this was the only way out? When Kelly finally spoke, she admitted something that no one had seen coming. I didn't do it all by myself, she confessed quietly, though her eyes darted around, refusing to meet the investigator's gaze. She was hiding something, and though she'd acknowledged that her actions hadn't been hers alone, she never revealed who had helped her, or if they had coerced her in any way. The question lingered in the air. Was Kelly the mastermind of this horrific act, or had she been pushed into it by someone with far darker motives? The answer was buried somewhere deep within her, locked behind a wall of silence that refused to crumble. But one thing was certain. Jeff's murder was far more complicated than anyone had imagined, and the truth was still far from clear. Could someone close to her be walking free right now? Let me know what you think. Kelly was charged, the weight of her guilt settling heavily as the trial progressed. The courtroom was a place of tension, where the prosecution laid out a seemingly airtight case, but there was something lingering, something missing. The evidence pointed directly to her, but the question on everyone's mind was she really the only one responsible? As the trial went on, Kelly was convicted. The jury had spoken and the verdict was clear. She would pay for Jeff's death. But even as the gavel came down, there was an unsettling silence that followed. No one else was arrested. No accomplice came forward. The haunting truth that Kelly's confession left hanging in the air was that someone had helped her, but that person remained a ghost. The story didn't end with Kelly's conviction, though. Jeff's family, still reeling from the loss of the man they loved, refused to accept that Kelly was the only person involved. They believed someone, was missing. His mother, in particular, felt the presence of her son lingering. Late at night, she claimed she could hear his footsteps echoing through the house, the sound of his movements unmistakable. His daughter, who had once been Daddy's little girl, refused to go near the garage. It was as if the place had become haunted, not just by memories, but by something far darker. Their insistence that someone else had been in that house, that someone else had been involved in Jeff's death, only deepened the mystery. Was it possible that Kelly had orchestrated the whole thing, and yet still had help from someone who had vanished into thin air? The unanswered questions gnawed at them. They couldn't let it go, and neither could the investigators. But despite their best efforts, no new leads came in. The second suspect, the one whose DNA had been found, whose presence had been reported, was never found. No one had answers. No one knew the full story. And so, the questions remained. Why didn't the police press further into this second suspect? Why, with all the evidence pointing towards someone else being involved, did they stop searching? Was it because they thought Kelly was the mastermind? Or was there something more they didn't want to reveal? The investigation seemed to hit a wall, and as time went on, the possibility of someone else being involved faded into the background, overshadowed by Kelly's conviction. What exactly happened in those final hours? What transpired in that house, in those last moments before Jeff's life was brutally cut short? Was Kelly acting on her own twisted impulse, or was this something that had been planned out meticulously? The more time passed, the more the details of those fateful hours seemed to slip further away, like sand through fingers. Was this a crime of passion, or was it something far more calculated? Kelly's confession didn't fit neatly into either category. The act of murder was violent, raw, passionate in a way, but the coldness in her statement about not acting alone, the meticulous nature of the crime, suggested that perhaps it wasn't a spontaneous act at all. Had it been planned from the very beginning? Or had Kelly been manipulated into believing that there was no other way out? The silence of the unanswered questions left a bitter taste, one that Jeff's family couldn't shake. They didn't know what had happened that night, and no amount of justice would bring closure. The haunting thought remained, what if Kelly wasn't the only one? What if the truth was buried so deep that no one would ever find it? And so, the case ended with one conviction but an endless loop of questions. Justice had been served for Kelly, but for Jeff's family, there was only silence. And sometimes, silence speaks louder than anything else. The truth, it seemed, was a mystery that might never be solved. For more real cases with dark secrets and stranger-than-fiction twists, subscribe to Silent Weekend Crimes.